Hey everybody, Art Barter with the Servant Leadership Institute. Today we've got a great webinar for you that Carol Malinsky and I did called Engaging the Disengaged. And I think you're going to find it very interesting and helpful. And one of the things I want to get you to think about before you listen to it is when you go to engage with employees that you may not have a great relationship with, remember it's about relationships. And if you want to engage with someone, you have to want to have that relationship with people. So think of it from that standpoint. Don't think of it as an employer-employee relationship. Think of it as a human being to human being relationship and work on the relationship. And guess what? People will become more engaged. Anyway, a lot of great ideas. Carol does a great job. Looking forward to having you listen to it and let us know what you think. Thanks everybody. Enjoy the webinar.
Good morning, Carol. How you doing?
I'm doing as just as well as anybody else is in this very, very strange time that we're going through.
Yeah, it is interesting. I saw something the other day, which I thought was very appropriate. I think it was Forbes. You know, I write for Forbes every now and then, and so they give us guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked all the writers to not put COVID in all caps, just do capital C, COVID-19.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, that's a pretty good approach to the times we're in. Yeah, we're in a tough time, but let's not make it more than it really is, Kudos to Forbes. Yeah. I really like what they did. Yeah.
That's great.
So you're in San Marcos, right, Carol?
Yes, I am.
I'm in Vista, and the SLI offices are actually in Carlsbad. So we're not in our normal studio, although the building did open up. We're just waiting for our state to recognize that leadership development companies are actually an essential business. So anyway, we won't get into that, Carol. We got more important things to talk about today.
So to get us started, I'm going to go over real briefly the goals we have for today's webinar. And we want to, first of all, identify who is this disengaged employee that we and many other leadership development companies talk about. We want to learn how to create engaged teams of employees, and we want to explore actions to create and encourage employee engagement. So, Art, to get us started, let's describe the engaged employee, what an engaged employee looks like.
Well, there's a lot of things that an engaged employee can look like. First, you kind of look for a good attitude, a smile, someone who enjoys being at work. And usually that's driven by a great mission and a good purpose. We've heard on a lot of different fronts over the years that when you have people engaged with a great mission, great purpose, and values that people can identify with, they get really engaged, which is kind of fun to watch. After they latch on to what the company does and how it does it, they start wanting to add value to people. And most purpose statements or mission statements is all about adding value to people. And if you get them engaged through that process, they're going to want to add value to other people. And along with that, they have to continually want to develop their skills to learn and grow, both as an individual and within the team. And growing and learning within the team is really, really important because most companies want to be team focused. They want to understand that, we can do better as a team than we can as individuals. And there are times when we just want to make the decision. We know better than everybody else, and we take that shortcut before we talk to our team. And usually that will disengage someone. So you know what? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the same demeanor all the time because everybody has ups and down days. But you see somebody who is smiling, can add value to people, get excited to grow and learn and develop their skills, and then be part of the team and be focused on the team performance versus the individual performance. Now you've got an employee that's very, very engaged. As a leader, that's one of the most rewarding things a leader can see and watch is to see an employee become very engaged with the company.
Yeah. The thing that really stands out for me with an engaged employee is really the point you talked about adding value to others. Adding value really takes a mindset switch, right? To change from thinking about just your work and how your work appears to other people and where you're going with the company to looking at work as being a team effort, looking at work from the standpoint of how it can enhance what's going on in the business. And that's not, usually the way people in a non-servant-led environment walk into a company and start working.
Yeah, and I love, you talked about walking into the company. And what I would suggest to people is when you do walk through that door in the morning, when you enter your work environment, think about the individual or team that you want to add value to that day. Let that door represent adding value. And then when you open that door and walk through it, you're now in the right mindset of adding value.
Yeah.
Now, like I said earlier, nobody's perfect.
Right.
There are days I walk through the door and, I've already got my mind on all the problems I got to face. And I'm ready to talk to people that are probably going to devalue how they feel about themselves rather than add value to them. And it's tough at times when things are interesting like we are with COVID-19 is how does the leader stay positive when you're just struggling to keep the place clean, right? And that's very difficult to do. So if you fail at that, that's okay. Just make sure you've got to go back and ask for some grace and some forgiveness because you're a human being. You're not perfect, but let the door that you come through into your work every day remind you, put a name on that of here's the person I want to add value to today or team. Yep.
Sounds like we could use a few little placards before the door, right?
Right. I walked in this morning, I looked above, it says main lobby. Now, we've had our lobby closed down since I think the second week in March to keep visitors from coming in. And I thought, well, main lobby, we don't use it anymore. Maybe we ought to take that sticker off the door and just put, remember to add value or, value champions walk through this door.
So we've talked about an engaged employee and what they look like, but let's take a look at the opposite of that, which is the disengaged employee. And Art, I don't know if you recall the stat or not, but I think it's somewhere close to, I want to say 70%.
It's around between 60 and 70% now.
Yeah. The researchers are saying that is the level of disengaged employees in our businesses today. And that's just, to me, is shocking. So what are those folks like? This slide is a perfect picture.
Yeah, there's no smile, no eye contact, no energy in the graphic. I love the graphic. And, you can sense when people are having a bad day. You can sense that. Now, the first thing we talk about, being apathetic. I don't think people consciously decide that they're not going to care about their work today. I think it has to do with either they don't identify with the company and what they're doing, how they're doing it. They're not fully engaged by the leadership in the company. I don't think most people decide to be apathetic when they walk through the door. I think that's a result of the circumstances that they're in. And it may be personal circumstances, it may be company circumstances, it may be a combination of both. In today's environment with COVID-19 in California, parents have got to be frustrated. I don't know what I would do if my kids couldn't go to school. Now, my kids were old enough, I don't have to deal with that, thank goodness. But wow, we're asking people to work at home. Their kids are there. A lot of the schools are going online training, so you've got to make sure kids stay focused. I had one parent tell me the other day that they have more access to the internet through the devices the school has provided than they allow on their computers at home. And so in this case, there's a lot of distractions. That doesn't translate into being apathetic. So be careful on how you see things, because I don't think people intentionally decide that they don't care. Some people are quick to point fingers and want to blame someone else, or in an indirect way, they just want to cover, their back so they don't get in trouble. How do you put the real problems on the table and find solutions if people aren't engaged? It's not going to happen, especially when the team is exposed to a brand new leader who does things differently. And they're focused on their personal agenda. What's more important to me is more important than the team. So I'm going to take care of myself. I'm not going to take care of the team. People have worked in companies for so long that are driven by short-term results that, they're not going to latch on to doing things differently in the company. Carol, you and I have been together for a long time. I started with Datron back in 97. And, the environment back then people weren't willing to put things on the table. The management team was known for trying the latest and greatest thing they read in the magazine or a book. And people were survivors because they knew that whatever was hot today would change in 12 months because the leadership wasn't committed to doing something different. They were looking for the quick fix. And we've had clients who have asked us to come talk to us to get the quick fix. And, implementing a company culture is not a quick fix. So that kind of gives you the idea. I think deep down, people are good people. I think it's circumstances that put them in this area of unengagement. The other stat is the reason people leave companies is primarily because of their leader, not because of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Well, having the right leader in that position is a company responsibility to make sure the leader reflects what the company wants to do and how they want to do it.
Let's look now at what the symptoms are of this disengaged team. And in looking at this, it's funny in thinking about Datron, you mentioned, 97, I came to work for Datron in 96. And I can honestly look at this list and say every single one of these things was going on.
And it really is amazing. Since 97, we still look 40, right, Carol?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
The first one I love is people who aren't open to change. Now, people don't like change. They just flat out don't like it. And when you bring something new to the company, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look for the commitment of the leader, because in order to implement change in a company, the leader has to start with the change. You can't tell people, I want you to change, and then not change yourself. And then I love the S word, the silo word. I don't think we need to explain that. I think most people understand when departments are more focused on their goals and making their job easier rather than making the company as a whole perform better. That's what we talk about being in silos. They're too focused on their group goals, not on the overall company team goal.
And what that does for the person who is trying to deal with business in that situation, at least for me anyway, I would become the mediator, right?
Right.
From one group to another group, saying, what is it that you need in order to give them what they need? I mean, you go into this big negotiation process, particularly if you happen to be, the individual that, doesn't have a higher job title than the other person has.
And then the next one, I love this, there's only one right way to do this, and it's their way. Right. A lot of leaders will say, oh, it's my way or the highway, right? That's a common thing that I grew up with. And we all know what that translates into. You do it my way, or you can go find somewhere else to work. Well, that's very inspiring, right? But, we look at their way as the only way to do it. And when people are closed mind, that is an indication that they're not willing to grow and learn and get out of their box to see things from a different perspective. And that's really what that one is all about. I think deep down inside, they want to look at doing things differently, but they've been harmed by leaders in the past by trying to get out of the box. And, it's like whack-a-mole. We whack them back in the box.
Right.
Well, yeah, of course they're going to say this is the only way to do it because they've been whacked over the head too many times. So, and then conduct personal business during work hours. And, one of my bugaboos, I love cell phones. And for those of you who are young listening, bugaboo is actually a leadership term from my early days in leadership. I don't think you'll find that in any leadership books, but what bothers me is a better way to say bugaboo is, I love having a cell phone and staying in contact. And one of the reasons I love that is we tell our folks, if you get a cell phone call at any time and it's a family member, you take the call, period. You take the call. What is interesting to me is when you see someone walking around the building during work hours, not during breaks or lunches, and they're talking on the phone. Now, they may be on the phone with the family member, but the communication is so easy today. Internet access on the phone, social media on the phone. Are you actually conducting personal business and letting that encroach into the time that you're being paid to work? And I don't have an easy answer to that. We used to block Facebook many years ago. And until someone helped me understand the power of that communication platform. And we no longer block that because that's how people communicate. And at times during lunches, that's how they relieve some of their stress as they go into that world and they interchange with people outside the company. So it's not a bad thing. It's just, it isn't worth blocking people from that avenue, right? and
Mhm.
saying, once you punch in, I'm not going to allow you to do anything in life, because life and work go together. And as leaders, we have to have some grace when it comes to that. So, but if you're balancing your checkbook, you're paying your bills online, and you're getting paid to do that. I had a leader once tell me, look who signed your check. And it was back when I worked for a company called Troy up in Orange County. You really need to be concerned about the company name that's on the check, because that's who hired you to do a job. And if you're doing that job, great, but you can't be doing personal things while you're at work. But the last one is one that I think we see most of, is we hold on to information to secure our positions. And, people from my age group, I'm a boomer, we felt and feel that information is power. And if we don't trust the leadership in our company to keep us fully employed through our time to retire, there's no way I'm going to give up the information I have, because that's security, and it secures their position within the company. And we have more instances with clients across the board where the different generations are having a difficult time exchanging knowledge and information and how you do things within the company, because they don't trust each other. But more importantly, they don't trust the leadership in the company to keep them engaged and fully employed once they give up that information. That's a tough one to get over, because if people don't feel secure, they're not going to willingly put information on it. They'll answer the question, maybe not give you all the information to that answer. Right, Carol? We've seen that, where people will just answer what's asked. Anyway, those are some ideas for you to look for in a individual or team that may be disengaged.
And just to add to that last one, another aspect, and what I ran into actually when I started with Datron, was I was learning a new tool, learning something that I had never done before. And so my leader was the person I needed to go to if I needed to be trained, to be shown how to do something. She would do the task, but that was it. She would do it, and that was her way of training me. So in other words, watch this, Carol, and she'd do it, but that was it, right? And I realized right away that that's what she was doing, was holding on to this knowledge, because it was very threatening to her to, share it.
Right, exactly.
My point really is that you're involving more than just that person that's holding on to the information. It's also very detrimental to the people that are trying to learn and trying to add value to the company.
Right. You're hindering their learning and growing process. Yep.
Right. Okay, let's talk now about the cost of a disengaged team. What kind of costs do we see? Oh my goodness, that gentleman doesn't look happy.
No, he doesn't look happy. I'm not going to go to him to talk about a problem. I'm going to stay away from him, right? So maybe I have a challenge today in my department that I need fixed in order to serve a customer. And that's the face I'm going to see in my neighbor in the desk next to me, or the cubicle or office. And I'm going, there's no way we're going to play well together today. Just no way. And so you see people act like magnets. And the analogy, if you try and put two magnets together, they repel each other. That's what we're talking about here. Two people who need to work together for the betterment of the team that act like magnets. And the closer they get to talking about the realities, the farther apart they get. Now, does that affect the group? Absolutely.
Yeah.
When they see people on the team who are acting like magnets, they're not want to get involved. They're going to stay away from it until those two people decide to make some peace. And so it affects the groups on how they go about dealing with challenges and problems, but it also is a demotivating factor as well, because people are going to go, wow, we didn't get anything done today because Art and Carol didn't get along in the meeting. Right. And we're not going to want to go back in the meeting until those two get whatever's going on squared away. And so it does impact the other group. And it does impact their ability to get their job done, being effective in the job that they're hired to do. We just want to stay away from people. And that all results in low trust. that drives the low trust. And when you have low trust in an organization, it's going to cost you more to get things done, and it's going to take longer. So decrease speed in how fast things get done, and it's going to increase cost. We're in a manufacturing company. We have processes to build parts. If we have an individual or a process that's broken, when that product moves on to the next station, there may be some rework to redo some of the work that's been done. Who's paying for that rework cost? Because we're not producing new product, we're having to redo people's work. My best example is in this world of downloading information from our computer business systems. A lot of software packages will just download every piece of data that's in the database that you need information from, and you end up with a spreadsheet that has like, I don't know, 110 columns. I only need 5 of them.
Mhm.
So I really don't need. So I have to take time to get rid of everything I don't need, get it in the order I want, etc. If I just got the information I asked for, I wouldn't have to go through all that extra time and effort. So it decreases my productivity and increases cost for the company because I'm not generating new work during that time. I'm just redoing the work that was provided to me. And so the trust factor really brings down teams and costs the company money. And once you understand that equation, you can start to latch on and go, well, last week I should have gotten 20 tasks done. I only got 10 tasks done. Why didn't I get the other 10 done? My guess is that 70, 80, 90% of the time, it's going to be because there's low trust within the people you need to deal with. You don't trust them, or they don't trust you, or you both don't trust each other. And it's a big impact on the cost of what a company incurs.
Yeah, and I think a very unhealthy power shift takes place to where the individuals that aren't playing well with one another can be given a certain power within the environment that is not effective and can take quite a while to undo once it's established. I mean, you have to go back then and rebuild your trust.
Yeah, if you think about what we talked about earlier, that people don't like change and they don't want to look at things differently. Some of the experience in the past with the leaders I work for is they'll go down this path of wanting to change things for 3 to 6 months. And then they decide, well, I'm not fully committed, so I'm going to go back to the way it was. So all that learning and development time you put in that 6-month period is now a waste of your time within the company, and you start from scratch again. So you're willing to learn and grow, but only to a certain extent. And then you throw all that stuff out and start all over again with a different idea. If you aren't committed to learning and growing in your life, it's going to slow you down in getting things done and how effective you can be.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make you a bad person because, you're going to have gifts that are going to be fully engaged. There is a cost of being disengaged, and it's a fairly large cost.
And so that leads us really to our next discussion, which is the culture itself of the company. Because all of this that Art's talked about, the positive side of engagement, the negative side, the disengagement, really has to do with the culture that exists within your organization. Art, could you talk a little bit about cultural change?
I love the first bullet point that you're seeing on the screen. It requires behavior change.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you've raised children and they're, we talk about terrible twos, somewhere when they're 3, 4, or 5, they're going to change their behaviors. And they're not going to be in the terrible twos anymore. Same thing with people within a company. You may have a behavior that needs to change in order for the culture to move forward. If you want to move from a power to a service-led company, then you can't keep your power behaviors and expect everybody else to change. You've got to remember that. It really starts with the leader of the company. In order to live with their mission, purpose, culture, values, they have to change their behaviors to support that. That individual has to want to change. And if there's no desire to change, or someone says, hey, I don't need to change, I've been this way all my life, I really don't need to change, that individual will have an impact and influence on the rest of the team. And that person's going to hold up the progress of the team and the culture change that you're looking for. Those people, in order to want to change, they have to find their own motivation to change. What motivates them to get better, to learn and grow? And I will tell you, they're going to find their motivation when their company leadership team wants to invest in them, invest in their growth, invest in their training, invest in their development, both as individuals and team members. Helping people change behaviors takes courage. And in a movie that I love, The Green Book, you got to get past some of the language in it. one of the lines that's my favorite is that genius is not enough. It takes courage to change people's heart. And before you change a behavior, you have to change your heart. And that's where the desire to change comes from. That takes courage. It takes courage to do that. It takes courage to do it within your own heart and courage to show other people on how they can change their heart in order to change their behaviors. So it takes courage to do that, both individually and with other people in your team. Now, through that process, you have to expect to encounter distrust. There's going to be resistance. There are going to be counterproductive behaviors in a lot of different forms. And again, I want to stress, it doesn't make people bad. This gets back to people don't like change. And when you ask them to change behaviors, ask them to change their hearts, ask them to look at what their real motivation is. If people distrust you, what's the motivation for that? Is it your behavior, their behavior? If they're resistant to change, have you explained to them where you want to go and how you want to be and why you want to do that and what kind of impact it's going to make on the lives of others? If people are fighting you and not changing in behaviors, is it because they're scared because of their past? Are they scared because they don't see you changing your behaviors? And so it comes in many, many forms. And Carol, you and I have used the term little foxes. And I like the analogy of the fox because the fox is very smart. It's a very beautiful animal. And in one of my homes, we had about an acre and a half. We had it fully fenced around the entire property. We had a fox get in our backyard one day, and there was a little hole in the fence, and he got through that, came into the pool, got a drink, walked around the pool. When I opened up the sliding door to get him out, I thought I was going to have to open up a gate or something to let him out. That little fox, beautiful, white tail, gorgeous color, he went right back to the hole in the fence that he came into. Didn't hesitate a bit. And I thought, that's just like people and culture change. They're going to see an opening, a little hole in the chink of the armor of the culture change. They're going to sneak in, they're going to get what they want, and then they're going to sneak back out. And so we came up with the term, they're little foxes. They're not bad people. They just haven't been motivated enough to want to change. And so they're going to stick with some of their old behaviors. So I think of little foxes when it comes to this. The fox is a beautiful, beautiful animal with a white tail, but it's very, very cunning and smart. And our job is to help change that.
For the most part, when we go in and we ask employees to bring about cultural change in the company, this is something totally foreign to most people. They've been operating under a certain way for years and years, and we'll get into that in the next slide when we talk about organizational culture. But now you're asking them to change. That threatens their very existence.
We don't like change. All right.
No. And
I find a pair of shoes I love, I'm not changing. Right. Yeah.
Yep, that's true. So let's go ahead and talk about organizational culture next and what that really means.
So how do you do business on a daily basis? And this looks at how you act on a day-to-day basis. Now remember, people aren't perfect, and so they're going to have bad days. But do you have more good days than bad days? Do you let the bad days sneak in once a week, once a month, every day? But it really is, how are you going to do business every day? And if you have values of being honest and have integrity, are you being honest with your customers when you're not going to make a shipment or delivery? Mm-hmm. Do you tell them why? Or do you come up with this little story that may not be 100% true, but kind of gives them a little bit of the truth? Are you going to be honest with them? How do you do business every day? If you're in a retail business and you say you're going to open up 10, do you open up at 10 every day, or do you get there 10:15, 10:30? Maybe I won't open till 11. Those little things. It really is a way of life. How do you help people understand that culture is about a way of life that cultivates over time? It doesn't change overnight. And one of the studies we looked at years ago, and it was a study out of Berkeley that said leadership training starts to generate sustainable results after 5 years of the training. And if you want to change the culture in an existing company, not a startup, but an existing company, it will take you 8 years to change that culture. Mm-hmm. So it gets cultivated over time. It's all based on shared experiences, shared values, and shared behaviors. Now, we use the word shared there in that people want to have an experience of feeling like they're successful, of having wins. They have values that they see people living by. They know that people aren't perfect. They're going to extend grace when you may not follow a value, but overall you do. And then how do you act every day, day in and day out? That's really, really important to the organizational culture. And what's going to drive that is the way people think and how they act. We love to tell people to think about your thinking because that's going to drive how you behave and how you act. I do more reflecting today in my business career than I ever have as a developing leader because I learn more from listening to people, getting input from people, and then going off and thinking about what I just heard. And so, my thinking will determine how I act and what my behavior is. And then what you do when you're not thinking about it. Values are very important in a company. And if they become a way of life, you really don't consciously have to work at it because the behavior has been ingrained in the individual and the organization to where that's how you do business. And when you're asked to do something by a customer that is wrong, everybody in the company knows the answer is no. And so you don't take time in discussing it for a couple of weeks when you know the answer is going to be no in 2 weeks, just like it would be today. So it's what you do when you're not thinking about it. And Ken Blanchard gave me one of the best compliments, and I think I've shared this with people before, is the one SLI conference that I called you and Robin the day that we were starting the conference with the reception that night and said, hey, you guys need to do this without me. And I was calling from a hospital bed. And, I thought I'd get out of the hospital. And lo and behold, I went to sleep for a couple of days and wake up until Thursday. And you guys did the conference all by yourself without me being there. And Ken called me a couple of weeks later and he said, Art, here's what's really important. It's not what your people do while you're there. It's what your people do when you're not there. And he said, just want to let you know, your folks at SLI did a wonderful conference and you weren't even there. That's what's most important from a leadership standpoint, is you don't have to be there and it becomes part of your people's day-to-day activities and behaviors, and they can do that without you being there. And, I always thank Ken for that because I needed to pick me up at that point in time. And with a lot of other people, they picked me up. But it really is important. Are the people behaving in accordance with your mission, purpose, values, whatever you call it, when you're not there? Or does their behavior change when you're not around? And that's really when you know the culture is starting to take hold, is when you don't have to be in the building every day, 5 or 6 days a week. Yep.
Great. So let's move along now we know that our goal is to build engaged teams, to see a culture that thrives on people being engaged. That's going to take an understanding of the building blocks of an engaged team. So Art, let's talk for a minute about the first building block, which is leadership commitment.
This is one of my favorites.
Favorite subject.
Yep. If you're not committed as a leader, then your company's not going to be committed, or your department, or the people you lead. And, I mentioned heart earlier, and leadership commitment comes from the heart. And if you're not committed to that change in your heart, then you're not going to impact your behaviors. And so the first building block in this, it starts with you. And if you're not willing to change, don't ask the rest of the organization to change just for the sake of change, because just be who you want to be. And if that's a lousy leader, be a lousy leader. But you can expect results from that because the organization is going to reflect who you are as a leader, especially those leaders that are, at the higher level in an organization. Or in our upside down pyramid, it's the lowest people at the lower end. So if you haven't seen our upside down org chart, I'm at the bottom. So the lower you go in our organization, the more responsibility people have. So you got to have commitment, and it's got to come from your heart. Then you think about it with your brain, and then you've got to translate it into your hands, which is behaviors.
Yeah. And the next one is mission and purpose.
Yeah. If you don't know what you want to do and why you want to do it, we do a little workshop called When You Find Your Why, You'll Find Your Way. And we've done this with college students quite a bit. And I really like to challenge them to find their why. Why do you want to do something? Why do you want to be involved with this? What's going on? Because once you find your why, you'll find your way. Now, I will tell you, asking someone in high school or college to find their why is a big ask, very, very big ask. I talk to parents all the time who don't understand why they're 18, 19, 20-year-old. They don't have any ambition. They don't know what they want to do in life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I usually ask them, well, did you know that when you were at that age? And most of the time the answer is, well, no. I said, then what's the problem? Why are you asking them? But if you don't know your why as a company, which is about your mission and purpose, you're not going to find your way. So why are you in business? Why do you do what you do? Why do you serve customers? Why do you serve customers in that market? Why have you chosen that market? What's your why? And how are you going to do it? So you've got to come up with a great purpose. At Datron, it's very simple. We want to positively impact the lives of others today and in the future. So to us, that translates into we will sell you product, but we're also here for the long term. We will take care of you after the sale. We will be here and we will serve you from our hearts. Just positively impact the lives of other people today and in the future. You got to find your why. And if you don't know your why, you're not going to be able to define a good purpose or a good mission. Our mission is very simple: to be a self-sustaining, profitable company. We don't believe in debt, so we want to be self-sustaining. And we also know if we want to commit to adhering to our purpose and really serving that, we have to be profitable as a company as well, or we won't be around to do that long term.
Yeah. Our next one is also extremely important, and that is values.
Values determine how you're going to get things done. What's the guidelines of how you get things done? And if you don't know what you value, you really can't drive your behaviors. That's what's really important. And I love the graphic because the value is I'm going to love my child. I'm going to love them unconditionally. And, I've learned over the years, children have to understand there isn't anything you're going to do to change how much I love you, period. And that's kind of what your values are all about. How are you going to act when times are tough? How are you going to act when times are good? And is that going to be the same? Is it going to be based on your values? So you have to know how you want to behave. Do you want to be honest? Do you want to be trustworthy? Do you have integrity? Our first value is our families come first, period. Nobody in this company, including me, is the only stone that this company is built on. And our last value we have is we're uncompromising in our values, which means we're willing to walk away from business, a relationship, when it requires us to act outside of our values. And that's what's really important.
Yeah, the thing I love about this particular image, just real quick, is that, values, most companies have them, and they have, lovely plaques that they put on the wall. I'm thinking of actually a particular client as I talk about this. And the values need to become an active part of what's going on in the company. They need to come off the wall and be part of people. In our image here, this gentleman, he's loving on his little boy. He's not holding back, showing him affection. He doesn't say he believes in family comes first. He's demonstrating it. That's what's really, really important, because then people can make decisions in alignment with their values.
Right.
So super, super important. Next, we move on to create ownership, which is another one that I know you're particularly fond of.
Yeah, when I wrote about this, I wanted people to act as if they were an owner. And I said, no, that's really not what we want. We want people to feel like they have influence over the process. And they have influence in the results of the company. And creating ownership is a special one to me because, I don't believe in an org chart, an organizational chart. Carol, I've never published an org chart. And the reason being is I want people to go to anybody at any time about anything to get what they need to do to serve the customer. Now, that's difficult for people to latch onto, especially people who join the company brand new. And that takes some splaining to do, as we say, right? It takes some splaining to do. But creating ownership, you invest in the people we want to inspire and equip. If you've inspired them with a great mission and purpose, now it's your job to equip people in order to do what you're asking them to do. Give them the tools, give them the education, give them the training, whatever it is that you're asking them to do, give them the tools they need to do that. And then when you've done that, the job that leaders have to do is step away. And when they get out of the way of the team, what's the message they're giving to their team? I'm transferring you ownership in this process and the results to you as a team. I've invested in you. I trust you. Now go do it. You don't need me anymore. And so people feel like they can influence the process and influence the results because the leader is out of the way.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I just learned within the last probably year and a half is, and I already knew that, but I never knew how to put it. It really is the less leaders do, the more gets done.
Mm-hmm.
The less leaders do, the more gets done. That's all about transferring ownership. Create that ownership in your people and get out of their way and let them go do what you've trained them to do, inspired them to do, and let them go do their job. Get out of their way. They know better. So just remember, If you want to create this ownership, do what you say you're going to do and then get out of their way, because when leaders do less, more gets done.
Your segue was just perfect, Art, because we're going to talk about some real practical things for people. And this is 10 tips to create and equip engaged teams. And the first one is involve the team in problem solving.
Yeah, you have a lot of people in your company who are experts in the process of their job.
Mm-hmm.
They know it better than the leader does because the leader doesn't do it every day. And when you have a problem that you need to solve, get the experts together in the room or, in the lunchroom, whatever you've got that is a safe environment for you to do that in. But involve the people who do the work. If you don't involve the people who do the work, then you're not going to find the real solution to the problem. And over time, what I found is you've got to let them know that the problem solving they're doing adds value to the company, that you value their input. And it doesn't necessarily their input's going to be the final decision, but they're able to contribute to that final decision in participating in the conversation. So, it's very important to let the people who know the process the best to solve the problem, not get in the way.
Yeah, great. Okay, number 2 is to provide the tools requested.
Yeah, this is a great one. And, I relate to this almost every day because, you give me a spreadsheet that has pivot tables and lookup tables and, all this stuff, the macros and micros and whatever else they call it, right? I'm going, what the heck is going on here? Just give me a spreadsheet, because I'm in the old world where the tool was pretty simple. It isn't that it's more difficult today. It's that people are smarter today. So the tool has evolved. And what I find in leaders that are in my age is the knowledge of people who work in your company has evolved and matured past your knowledge, and you have to give them the tools that they request. And those tools they're not going to be tools you understand, because things have matured way past you. And so let them have the tool, let them find the tools. And since they're performing the work, let them pick those tools and tell you what they need to do that. And we've got some tools in the company. We do modeling and mechanical engineering with heat dissipation, EMI, which is, any interference that goes on in an RF radio. I don't understand that stuff. I don't want to know how to run the tool, because I have people who know that. Temperature models on the inside of the radio, how it operates in heat, how it operates in cold. I know we have to have that, but don't give me the tool to go do that, because I'm going to mess it up. All right. The user has said, Art, I need this tool in order to do this, 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 and this. I trust that they're the experts, and I'm investing in the tools to give it to them. So let them decide and then give it to them. Invest in it and give them the tools they need.
Right. And one other thing, if you happen to be in a company where you have wonderful employees who think it's great they can fix the broken tool, let them have what they need in good working order and not be hung up on saving $5.
That's a great item to bring up, Carol, because, what you and I both have seen is when times get difficult, and every company goes through this, what's the first thing you do? You start looking at expenses. You start cutting back. Right. You make people, extend the life of a printer or a pair of pliers or, the handheld power tool. What can I do to put some, duct tape on this? And, that may be okay for the times, but when the company turns around and starts getting out of that time, your culture is hurt because people don't latch on that times have gotten better, and they stay in those old times of, well, I can't do this because they told me back in tough times I had to make it last longer.
Right.
And when you get better and you have the money to invest in tools, you got to drag people out of that and pull them out of it. And it doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that people get used to a certain culture. And when you move it and change that cheese, right? When they move their cheese, you've got to help them move that. You just can't expect them to change and ask for the better tools automatically, because it's change. It's all about change. Yep.
Okay, our next one, tip 3, is to ask for their input.
Yeah, in tough times when there's conflict on a team or between teams, one of the things leaders need to do is understand it's a difficult situation and create that safer environment where people can talk and maybe work out their differences. And the important thing is you got to ask people for their ideas. And, you've seen me, Carol, where, we may have an all hands meeting during tough times, and I'll ask if there's any questions, and it will be quiet. I might have one or two questions, but then I'll make the comment, something like this. If I were in your shoes and you were listening to me talk, here's the question I would have. And I ask myself the question and then I answer it. And what that does is it helps people know that they can ask the question, that I'm looking for questions that people really want to know about, but they're afraid to ask, right?
Right.
And so sometimes the leaders just got to ask, hey, if I was in your position, here's what I'd be concerned about, or here's the questions I would be asking. You've got to be sensitive. You've got to make sure you act in accordance with your values and your behaviors. Those are very important. If people see you stray away from that in those difficult situations, that's exactly what they'll do. And look for the positive ways to resolve and re-engage the people in the team. And it doesn't have to be anything great. It could be a $5 or $10 gift card to Starbucks. And people are just thrilled that you thought about them and got the card and gave it to them. It may be as easy as saying thank you or good job or I appreciate the effort. Especially in difficult times, you may not get to the solution very quickly, but you've got to tell them that you appreciate the effort, you appreciate the input and the feedback. And that will really help them to understand that their input is valued.
Okay, our next tip is to ask for their ideas.
We generate a program called the PIP program, PIP, and that stands for Productivity Improvement Program. And what was important for us is we understood that leaders don't have all the solutions and good ideas on how to improve the process. And one of the things to remember, this is not ideas on who needs to improve. It's not people driven, it's process driven, right?
Right.
So we set up a program that says, help us improve a process. And we will look at that process. If we implement it, we will share with you the savings that the company gets in the next 12 months. And we will pay you at the time we implement that process. And we had a PIP committee that looked at things. And we implemented quite a few things. And I think the largest check we ever gave out was, I think, $1,800 or $2,000. When you let people share their ideas, let them implement those ideas to improve the process and help the company save money. One of the things Ken Blanchard said is share the cash, share it. Let them participate in the savings that their ideas brought about. And, that's very powerful because you tell people you want to hear from them, you want to improve processes, and oh, by the way, we'll let you share in the savings that the company sees or expects to have out of that idea. And so sometimes you have to water that plant to get it to grow. We did it through the PIP program because they filled out the form. It was their idea. They didn't have to go to a team of leaders and get the permission to fill out the form. We said, here's the form, fill it out and tell us what you think we ought to do. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of history there, right, Carol? We have a lot of laughs
I'm
over that
laughing
one.
because, we had folks that knew enough to look at what we were going to be building and focus on the pieces of equipment where we were going to build lots and lots, right? So it affected, when they had a good idea, it really affected how much they were able to gain through the PIP program, as well as making a huge impact in what we were in our costs of building the product. So, helped both sides of the scenario there, both the company and the individual.
The favorite one I had was, for the audience, we built a radio and the product model number is an RT7000. And it's an HF radio that sits on your desk and it's a base station. And we had some options on one of the boards inside the radio. And when it was originally designed, we thought, well, if someone wants that option, it will already be in there. It's already been included in the cost and we'll just make the difference. Well, what was funny is we hadn't sold that option in something like 7 years, 8 years. Customers weren't interested in that option. So the idea was, why don't you get rid of these options in the board, in that radio? So we got rid of the options. We saved a lot of money because we never sold it. And, it took somebody on the floor in our production to point out that says, when was the last time you sold this? We haven't sold in a long time. Well, why are we putting it in the radio? And those were the things that, we get so used to doing things. We don't like to change. And what we find out is when we do change and listen to people, guess what? We save money. Things get done quicker. Trust goes up and it costs less. Yeah. That's my favorite product story in the PIP program.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at tip number 5, which is to communicate business results regularly and honestly. And there's executives now that are hiding under their tables.
We generate a financial package. It's generated every month. And our business goes up and down on a monthly basis. So we have meetings with our leaders once a quarter. We have an all-hands meeting. Supposed to have it once a quarter. Sometimes it goes 6 months. Right now, we can't get everybody in the room. So we're trying to figure out how to get 100 people on a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how we're going to do that. But you talk about results, whether they're good or bad. And I like to present the same information that I get from the finance team. I don't put it in different bullet points. I don't put it in different formats. We just had one of these last week. I went through the financial package, showed everybody every schedule that I get every month in the same format. And it makes preparing for these meetings pretty easy because you just have to turn over the financial package and Lisa, put this in a PowerPoint. All right. And I'll talk about it. We hired a new director of planning and forecasting a week or so ago. She sat through the meeting and she sent me a note afterwards that says, Art, this was a great detailed discussion of what's going on in the financial statements. It's, one of the best I've ever seen. And it isn't that we're really good at it. It's just we share the information straight out of the box. We don't sugarcoat it, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's really what's important, because if you're true and honest in your discussions and you have integrity in your discussions, guess what? People are going to live up to those values. It generates respect and it generates trust. And then the most important one is you answer all the questions. You keep asking if there's any questions until there are no questions left. And I've got to stress this. This is really important in times like what we are now with COVID-19 and times when you have difficult results. If you're going to have a reduction in force, you get people together, you answer every question. If production rates are going down, you get people together, you answer every question. And I like to have all hands meetings, and I will sit there for 2-3 hours and answer every question until people are tired of asking questions, because I don't want them to go home with a worry on their mind that I can talk about and help them feel a little bit better. So you have to answer all the questions. Now, in today's environment with COVID-19, I can't get people together in all hands meeting. I've got to do Zoom. I've got to do a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done a couple of times now is I've put together an email. The last one, I shared some puzzles that I'm doing. You can't go anywhere on the weekend, so I'm back putting puzzles together. It was a photograph. It's a gentleman in a supermarket put on his scuba gear, and that was how he was covering up his face, and he was carrying his own oxygen with him. Had his mask on, had the thing in his mouth, had the flippers on. That's a funny way of dealing with what we're going through today. Now, my guess is it was staged. And then we showed a copy of the Zoom meeting we had with the sales team, because they're located all over the country. They're not within the building. So, hey, let them see the faces of the people. And then we went around top to bottom, introduced who everybody was and told people who they were and where they were located. Now, I didn't talk about any results. I did sneak in some things that we're still committed to keeping the place clean and meeting all the requirements of COVID-19. But we talked about, what are you doing to pass the time in your life? What are you doing? And, when leaders can be real and just say, hey, I'm sitting around putting puzzles together, that's going to send a very positive message to people, knowing that, hey, you're going through the same thing everybody else is. People around here know that I haven't had a haircut in, 8 weeks. And when my hair gets too long, people want to know if I'm going to start up a rock band. And I don't sing that very good. I play a little guitar, but I don't like having a ponytail, and I'm about ready to get a ponytail. So in difficult times like this, you've got to have a little fun and laugh at yourself, but also take what you need to do serious. And you can do that in positive ways that in other times you may not communicate that way, but answer all the questions. We're trying to figure out how to do an all-hands Zoom meeting, or at least have some multiple Zoom meetings where people can ask me questions about what's going on. Haven't got a real solution to that, but I may have to have 10 meetings of 15 or 20 people each. But hey, if that's what I need to do to answer questions, hey, that's what I need to be doing, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it every day, but people need to know that in these times, we're taking care of their health. We're doing everything we can to keep our facility as clean as possible.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's take a look at tip 6, which is to provide positive feedback and acknowledgement.
Acknowledge people in the hallway. Say hi, smile, do something other than just walk by and with your head down. Make eye contact. There are times when you're going to see someone and you can tell they want to talk, and you just got to say, hey, listen, I need to go to the restroom, or I've got a meeting I got to get to. There are going to be times like that, but acknowledge people that they exist in the hallways or meetings. The other one is thank people. Thank them for their effort. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Just tell them you appreciate the effort in times like this, or you appreciate the effort on the project, whether it was positive or negative outcome. Thank them for the effort, compliment them and encourage them, and let them know that, hey, I believe in the team and I believe that you can make this happen. And, I get asked at times, what's your biggest challenge as a leader? And I say, helping people believe in themselves as much as I believe in them. That's encouragement, and get them to the point where they know they can do this.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when I have my value, mission, and purpose meetings with people, especially with new people, I always end up with 2 things. I believe this team can perform at this level. I believe that we have the knowledge to do this. And the last thing I tell them is remember to have fun. But you got to tell people you believe in them, and you've got to tell them to have fun while they do it.
Yeah. And please don't underestimate this, listeners, because, I know there are many folks out there that either don't feel they need to be thanked for doing their job, or you're in an environment where, it is real good and people acknowledge one another in the hallways and so forth. But there are a lot of companies and employees out there that do not get this kind of feedback.
Right.
And never hear anyone say, I believe in you. So it is critically important if you want engaged employees.
Yep.
Next one is to invest time with employees, very closely related to the last one we were talking about.
I grew up with a phrase that leaders said, that my door is always open. And I've come to believe through this culture change of servant leadership we've been through, that I really don't care about your door, whether it's open. I really don't care. Rip the door off the wall. What I look for to see if people are investing time in their people that report to them or that they work with is, show me your calendar. If you're scheduling time to do this, that's what people see. It's important. I have one-on-ones every week with the people that report to me at the same time every week on the same day. I'm committed to putting them in my calendar, not, hey, next time I get a chance, I'll come see you. And you can do that through lunch. You can do that before work, after work at Starbucks, or having coffee with people. I like to have one-on-one meetings. Most of those take place in my office because I want people to feel safe and be able to talk and bring things up. Now, we don't live in a perfect world, so I can't tell you that 100% of the time people feel safe in my office. And when that occurs, then it's my job to go somewhere else, in a conference room, in the lunchroom, Starbucks, whatever it is. Go do that in that safe environment. And then when you have those one-on-one meetings, or you ask for employees' input, you've got to invest time in listening to understand what they're saying. And that's really important. Make sure you listen to understand what they're saying, and then go think about your thinking once you have that input. Invest in people, put them in your calendar is the real message here.
Mhm.
And your direct reports, is very important that you talk to them on a regular basis. Same day, same time. There's going to be fluctuations, but at least have that on your calendar to know that you want to spend time with those employees and they feel their input is desired and valued.
Right. Okay, next, number 8 is create a safe environment that supports, here's the real key in this one, stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I've mentioned the safe environment a couple times already. If you want to build trust, which helps build great relationships between individuals and departments and organizations, is you have to create the safe environment for people to step out of their comfort zone. At Datron, we have small groups, and the small groups are a group of leaders that get together once a month, sometimes a little bit more often, and they talk about their struggles, their successes as leaders without their boss in the room or the CEO in the room, and that gives them a chance to grow. We have to do the same thing with our employees throughout the rest of the company. Ask for their input, invest time in them, let them know they're valued. That all creates that safe environment. When you encourage people to have a different mindset, it impacts their behaviors, and now it's just going to improve the situation. Go beyond the walls of your department and get the information you need. When you know someone in another department needs information for you, give it to them. Give it to them ahead of schedule. Create that environment where people feel like they're really a team, and that creates that safe environment to have some of those very open conversations you need to have. But you've got to create this safe environment for people to learn and grow in so they can get out of their comfort zones.
Right. And that goes along actually with tip number 9, our next tip, and that's to organize interdepartment exchanges. This has been done very effectively at Datron.
Yeah, we try to bring departments together, share details. We always make sure when we've created initiatives to go solve a problem that we have the departments that are involved in that process or who receive the results of that process in that problem-solving environment. We usually have leaders as mentors and coaches for that team, which means you need to be invited into that meeting, not control the meeting from the top down.
Right.
Carol, there are times when I know the team can be more effective without me in the room, and I'll leave. I don't go back in until they invite me back in, because I want them to feel like they can have that conversation without me in the room and know that I'm not coming in to see what's going on. Getting people in the same room, starting the exchange, and then as a leader, get out of the way. And the way I get out of the way is I leave the room and go take care of some of the things I need to do. And then they'll eventually come back and ask me back in the room and say, hey, this is what we decided. And now I can mentor and coach them rather than tell them what to do. And that's really what we're talking about here. Get people to talk and exchange information, and then let them go make the decision on how to get better. And they'll create some great goals. They'll achieve those goals, and you'll solve the real problem. What's the root cause of that problem? And as well as I do, Carol, is a lot of times we start fixes, especially at the leadership level, that really aren't going to fix the problem because we haven't identified the root cause yet and what's causing that problem.
Yeah. What happens in these exchanges is really cool because it gives you a chance as an individual contributor to understand where are the pain points in the other department. And all of a sudden, when people start to understand one another and to describe what they do and why they do it and when they need it, light bulbs start going off all over the room because people realize, hey, if I made this little change in my process, it would positively impact what's going on in this other group.
Yep. Now, I really like this graphic. Look at this. The guy who's talking, the gentleman, he's in shorts.
Yeah. Yeah.
His shirt's not tucked in. He doesn't have a tie or coat on. If he were dressed differently, had a 3-piece suit on, do you think his audience would be listening to him? I mean, look at the audience. Short sleeve shirts, polos, t-shirts. They're sitting back on the couch. If that person was dressed in a suit and tie, I don't think they would give them the time of day. And that's part of meeting people where they are. I love the interdepartmental exchanges. And when you do that, I very rarely tuck in my shirt anymore. And I love that. But when I need to clean up and wear a suit and tie, I can clean up. And there's very few times we'll do that. When we have high-level customers come in, I will show them the respect. First day will be suit and tie day. The rest of the week is casual. They don't want to be dressed in a suit and tie either. They want to be casual as well. So I love the graphic because it doesn't show the normal work environment that I was brought up in. And it really reflects the new norm of the company where we're relaxed, easygoing, and we want to solve problems. So we're working together as a team. It's a safe environment.
Okay. And finally, tip number 10 is to encourage relationship building across department lines.
I also love this graphic because the gentleman with the glasses on, I think that's red hair, right? If I was in a meeting with him, I'm a boomer, I'm 66 years old. Would I give that individual any credit and listen to him? Today, I probably would. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe not so much because they're different. But you got to encourage that relationship building across department lines. And, You can do it in a lot of simple ways. If you show an interest in a life and show an interest that you want your teams to have relationships with other departments, the last thing you want to tell your team is run everything through me before you talk to another department.
Yeah.
And I've seen leaders do that all the time. That's not getting out of the way. That's controlling. You can get together weekly. You can learn how to exchange ideas. I love what one of our clients did is they did a lunch and learn where they were talking about different behaviors. And Carol, you put together that program with the slide deck and you basically did a train the trainer type thing, but you trained the person who was the head of the group at lunch. They called it Lunch and Learn. And it was a pretty interesting program. When you have people from multiple departments do a lunch and learn, you're encouraging people to talk between departments. I love going to the big companies where they say, well, you know, Department XYZ has done all kinds of training, but my leadership doesn't believe in training, so we don't do anything. Well, that tells me that there's a desire of the departments to work together, but the leadership is the problem, not the people.
Mm-hmm.
So leadership needs to do things a little bit differently. You know, I can meet with different leaders and managers and I can learn from them. And if you create that learning environment, people can actually learn and grow when you build that relationship with other departments. And it's very important to do that. What you're going to find out is you're going to learn a lot when that happens. You're going to see things get done quicker. You can step away and tell your people, just go make it happen. You know who you need to talk to. The environment I want in Datron is go to anybody at any time about anything. Don't go up and down the org chart because I want you to build those relationships with the people who are going to help serve the customer better. And that's when your heart really comes out. So make sure you're encouraging relationships across departmental lines.
Definitely. Now, our next slide with everything that's going on today, this seems more and more important. It's happening more and more frequently in companies, and that is teams that are remote. And working with them requires special care. Art, do you want to just give us a couple of thoughts about that since you now have such a remote team?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Challenges can be technical. Challenges can be maybe the processes don't work the same when you work from home. We have about 30% of our workforce right now working from home because of COVID-19. That means that a lot of things we do here internally that we take for granted may not exist in that work environment at home. Now, you can do a search on the internet and get all kinds of recommendations on how people who work remotely should set up their home.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we looked at some of that stuff as, you know, make sure you can close the door, make sure you have a desk, make sure you have a computer, make sure you have quiet time, that people in the house understand that you're working, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that doesn't work in COVID-19 times because you can't close your door with the family because kids are not in school. Maybe both spouses at home are working from home for the first time and sharing space. There's a couple I know here in San Diego. They decided to work on their dining room table. And about a month later, I saw them building 2 separate desks that now they're working on separate desks. They're still in the same room, but they said, this isn't going to work. We can't share a dining room table.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you have to think about doing things differently. Communication's important. Sharing information's important. I do more Zoom meetings today than I've ever done in my life. I had one this morning at 8, had one at 9. Now we're on Zoom doing a webcast. I'm in Zoom world today. Now, I don't mind it because on my iPad, I can be in the Zoom world anywhere I go. And so instead of talking to people on the phone and not being able to see their face, now I can see their face. So the relationship can still be there. I can still read body language. Meeting last week, I got to a point and I said, I think it's break time. And I said, let's be back in 5 minutes. And kind of silence, I said, well, here's how I look at it. We're going to break so everybody can, you know, go to the restroom. When we have that meeting here at work, guess what? There's a line outside the restrooms. Well, guys, there's no line at your home, so you don't need 15 minutes. Let's come back in 5 minutes. There's no line, you know? So, because the Zoom world is different. I call it Zoom world. You've got to have some security. And, you know, this has been in the papers, especially with Zoom. But about 6 weeks ago, I got a Zoom meeting number and I punched the number in except for one other number was wrong. And I got into a meeting and there was a big spreadsheet on the screen. And I kind of sat there and I said, they're not talking about radios. And I said, is this so-and-so's call? And the gentleman said, no, not exactly. I said, sorry, I signed on to the wrong meeting. Well, at that point, I realized that the Zoom meetings I was having, I needed to put a password to. And so I created a password for my Zoom meetings. I implemented the waiting room. Now I can see the waiting room, see when everybody's there, and then admit everybody at one time. And it brings a little bit more of that safe environment we were talking about,
Right.
where, people can't just automatically sign in. They have to go through the waiting room. So you learn a little different things about security. I think the biggest thing with COVID-19 is we have to appreciate the interruptions that people who don't work from home on a regular basis will face. The interruptions. I started working at home pretty much right away, maybe a week or two after the restrictions. And, I was getting a lot done until I got to Wednesday. Wednesday in our neighborhood is Weed Whacker Day. And, I told my leadership team, I said, I think every weed whacker in North San Diego County is in my neighborhood on Wednesday mornings, because from 7 o'clock to almost 1 o'clock, there isn't a silent moment because I'm in weed whacker world. So didn't schedule Zoom meetings for Wednesday mornings. Or if I did, I went into the furthest room I could find. Or I went into an office that was closed. Our SLI office is closed, but I can still go in there and do a Zoom meeting there. But the environment we're asking people to work in is going to be interrupted. 2 weeks later, I had a neighbor who decided to jackhammer his driveway. And I've gone from weed whackers to jackhammers. I'm going to work. I can't handle this stuff. Now, not everybody has those interruptions, but if you have kids home from school who aren't online learning with their school, and every school district's different, you have to expect interruptions. So you can't ask people to work from 8 to 5 or 7 to 4. You have to allow them flexibility to either work a little bit later in the day, later at night, when they have that quiet time. But in times like we have now, we're throwing people into that world that don't normally work in that world. And especially if both individuals in that home are working and they have other family members, it's going to be chaotic. And so you can't expect people to work the same way they do when they work inside the building here. So those are some of the things that I've learned when you're working with remote teams. You have to communicate on a regular basis. You have to have interface with people. But I think in today's times with COVID-19, you really have to have flexibility. You have to have an understanding that people will probably not be at your beck and call. And for leaders who understand what beck and call is, you need to change your behavior because you're supposed to be at their beck and call. But that's another webinar, right, Carol? Yeah.
Well, it certainly is, the whole environment, this remote world that we're now in. It's the perfect environment for the servant leader, because the first thing that hits you is I've got to trust people to do what they said they were going to do. They were going to go and work from home.
Right.
And whatever that may look like, as their servant leader, you have got to trust them, or, you're going to be miserable. You're going to be miserable.
Exactly. I'm looking at a screen of Carol. She has in her background the SLI logo screen. And for people who know how to change their background, that's the other thing I've learned about this working at home in Zooms is if you have something in your background you don't want people to see, like your guitar stand or the things that are going to take you away from work. In my office at home, I have a couple crosses on the wall. And, depending on the audience, that may not bother people.
Right.
Some people it will bother. So I have to be sensitive to that. But that's my home environment. And in this new Zoom world, I'm actually inviting people into my home. And I know when you attend a Zoom meeting with your normal home background, people are looking about, what's that? What's that on the wall? What's that in the bookcase? What books are you reading? And they're going to go through that for 15 minutes before they actually get engaged with you. And, that's okay, but you got to be a little more sensitive about your environment. One of our sales guys that lives in Detroit, he has a new young son. And we kidded him. He said, Bill, we want to see your son. So bring your son to the next meeting. That gets the family involved. So there's things like that you can do as well. Show me your dog. I have a little grand dog. Her name is Minerva. And when my daughter's on a leadership meeting, hey, guess what? She brings Minerva into the camera for a little bit. It brings people joy and makes them laugh. So it's not all about just being focused on conducting business. It's being real people. Yeah.
Right. And that's really what it's all about. And so much that we've talked about today with regard to building engaged teams is about us being real people with one another.
Right.
You can get just as much done, more so, right? And fulfill all the business goals that you may have being a real person. So let's summarize what we presented today. We identified who is the disengaged employee and the engaged employee. We explored the building blocks of culture change, which are leadership commitment, mission and purpose, values, clear behavioral expectations. And we reviewed 10 practical tips to create or encourage engaged teams. Art, is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Engagement is a huge issue in the United States. And, like I said at the beginning, I don't believe people intentionally come to work disengaged. You may have some that fall in that category, but I don't think it's pervasive with most employees. I think it has to do with the culture they're in, the environment they're in, and how their leaders act. So, when an individual decides, well, I'm going to be engaged in this company, that may last for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But if the company doesn't have the same commitment, we're not going to see those numbers change dramatically in the workforce. I think we need to have a servant's mindset. I think we have to let our values guide us in what we do. I think we have to know our why as a company and as individuals. And then I think we need to let our commitment to those be reflected in how we behave and know that people aren't perfect. They're going to make mistakes. You are going to make mistakes. You as a leader are going to make mistakes. When people understand that we're human beings and we're not going to be perfect, there's got to be forgiveness and grace. And when that happens, that whole cycle happens where people feel they can mess up and not be shown the street or fired. They can make mistakes and learn from them. I think that's going to be when we see the change in people really feeling engaged in the organization. There's a bunch of other stuff that can go into that, but I think it's really on the leader's shoulders to be committed, have a great mission and purpose, the why, understand how to make it happen through your values, what are you going to live by, and then talk about the behaviors you're going to have and what your expectations are within the culture you've created. That's when you're going to see engagement change in your company. We've seen it at Datron over the years. We've had people leave for greener pastures, and within a year, they want to come back, because they've decided that money isn't everything. And, there's companies that will pay a lot more money than we can. And in the technical area in San Diego right now, we're up against some very, very large public companies who are buying the talent they need. And when they pay 20, 25, 30% more than market, they get people who are chasing money. And my guess is those are probably the people who are more disengaged than engaged, because they're not looking for mission and purpose in that company. They're just following the money. And we've had more people who want to come back to Datron after they've left chasing that money, because there aren't very many companies who actually do what they say they're going to do the way Datron does. Now, that's a great compliment on the culture, but it's not me. It's the whole team in the company. It's everybody. And when that culture becomes strong, you're going to attract people, and people are going to come back to you because you're different in the marketplace. And that's going to give you an edge in recruitment and retainment, because people just don't want to leave that environment because it's so rare these days. And I hope everybody stays safe in the COVID-19 environment. Wash your hands, right? Wear your mask if you have to wear masks. I've got my mask on my desk here. And stay safe, everybody.
You can visit us at www.servantleadershipinstitute.com for blogs and other materials to support your servant leadership journey. We hope that today's presentation added value to you, and you can reach us with any questions you have at info@servantleadershipinstitute.com. Thanks so much. Be well, stay well, and lead well. Thanks so much.
Take care, everybody.